Welcome to the Call Your Shot podcast, your weekly sports recap podcast where we break down the hottest headlines, dissect the latest injuries, and serve up our own hard-hitting analysis of the past week in sports. But that's not all. We're not just here to talk about the past, we're here to predict the future as well. On the Call Your Shot podcast, we boldly predict the outcomes of the upcoming week's games.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening. This is the Call Your Shot podcast with your hosts, Alix and Drew Moore. Today's episode, we're going to go over the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament for men's and women's, as we had a lot of upsets in the men's, not as many in the women's, but we're going to get into as much as we can. So, Drew, was there anything from the men's side that you wanted to get into first, other than, DJ Burns and NC State doing what we thought they were going to do?
That's it. It was an interesting start to the tournament. Also, side note, battling a little bit of a cold right now, so if you hear me, sniffling, sounding a little nasally, sounding kind of like Alix or whatever, then that's the main reason why. But we're going to try and power through this just like MJ did with his flu game. Same kind of deal, same kind of person. Moral of the story is, in the first round with the men's tournament, what we ended up seeing was a lot of the underdogs coming through and winning these games outright, which ended up being the most underdogs to win outright since 2001. So they went 12-20, and again, most since 2001. Also, 14 double-digit favorites ended up going 11-3, which is the best ever since the start of the tournament. And as well as, going into the Sweet 16, this is only the fifth time ever that we have both number one, or all the number ones and all the number twos in the tournament still. So it started out with the underdogs, but then ultimately, as time went on, it ended up just being the story of the chalky favorites getting there, the public just absolutely hammering the books, and guys like Alix taking advantage of it right now. So yeah,
it was clear to me, and as we talked about it earlier, I think that Drew is in last place in both of the leagues.
I'm like second to last place. All right, you know what I'm saying? But it's also it's based on, it's not, well, just yet. Hold on. You don't win the bracket based on how you do in the first round. You win the bracket as the points progress, they increase. And so as long as we're doing good as it goes on, and like I said, we need Houston to come out on top. And so far, I think that they'll be able to get the job done, but it'll be kind of sus going forward, to be honest. But they'll get the job done.
But yeah, as you mentioned, though, we had so many double-digit seeds upset in the first round. We had Yale, Grand Canyon, James Madison, NC State, Oakland, James Golke out here looking like Steph Curry and stuff. Bro, I saw like a lot of like social media posts that him and his team are doing because they were getting so much notoriety and stuff, and they're saying that Oakland's apparel site crashed the night of and everything like that, just with all the attention that they were getting. They were trying to have all of these marketing agencies reach out to them to promote their products and all this kind of stuff. So it was kind of crazy, and kind of like the Cinderella stories that happened just from the first round. That was just in the first round. Yeah. So we had 10 threes against Kentucky, who were out of like people that weren't like the number 1 and 2 seeds. I feel like Kentucky was one of those like kind of elite teams that people predicted could have gone far. I think they were like top 6 or 7 when it came to odds going into the tournament. So they were probably the most surprising upset of the round so far, and of the past 2 rounds for me.
Yeah, but I mean, they were one of those teams though that were the one-dimensional teams that were historically ended up resulting in a first round or a first weekend exit, or losing in the first round or second round. So they did match that criteria. However, the teams that were able to sneak away, obviously NC State, and then also Illinois. It was a little hairy there at halftime with my pick, Morehead State, and then at the end of towards the end of the game, second half, it turned into a bloodbath, and Morehead State could just not keep up. They were just too big, and Illinois, regardless of what their defense was doing, because their defense is the main weak point for them, but their offense, when they're clicking, it's damn near impossible to get them stopped. They got so much length down low. They're one of the bigger teams in the tournament still, and also they have that experience with the seniors as well too. So I just think that if they're able to play that well on offense, it's not going to really matter what they're going to do on defense. But that being said, it still is part of the criteria where typically those teams don't end up making it past the first weekend. They made it past the first weekend this time. And so every time after that, I'm going to be looking for spots to bet against them. But right now, it's looking like a good spot to back them coming up here against Iowa State. Same with NC State. I might be jumping on the bandwagon there with you. All right,
I changed my mind. We don't want you. We don't want you.
It's fine. It's fine. I get it.
You were so confident that you so confident in Texas Tech. You're like, oh, Texas Tech. You then actually have to go against a good team as if they didn't beat UNC and Duke like a week before that.
We're just out here acting like that's who they were. That's not who they were the whole season. Like they just started pulling.
It was who they were to start the season.
Okay, but that has nothing
so
to do with
I think it showed that they had the pieces. They went through their little midseason slump, as a lot of teams do, and you want to get hot at the right times. Just whether it be the NFL, whether it be basketball, college basketball, and stuff like that, they're getting hot at the right time, and everybody's working together. DJ Burns is elite, and they have a good surrounding cast around him, and I think that they can pull off the upset. And like I said, I'm mad that I didn't choose them over Kentucky. Kentucky didn't even get to the second round, but I had Kentucky beating them in the second round just because I didn't think that they would be able to match up with him guard wise. But I mean, now they don't have to, and now they're on to Marquette, who is, what did we say? They are currently a 6.5 point underdog against Marquette. So you're saying that you would take those points and take NC State?
I mean, I'm taking straight up. Oh, really? All right, now.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we already won the Texas Tech bet. You know what I'm saying? So we going with it until they get to Houston. I think that Houston's going to beat Duke. So if NC State were to have to go against Houston, I think that could be some issues.
All right. I mean, but again, the things that scare me are NC State's defense, right? Mm-hmm. Initially, when the tournament started, they were at like 98th or so when it came to their defensive efficiency. Now, according to Ken Pom, they're 75th. So now they're inside that criteria that is able to make it to the Sweet 16, and then also potentially have a chance to make it to the Elite 8. So they do fit that criteria right now. However, when it comes to offensive efficiency for Marquette, they are 19th in the nation, and they've shown that. And then they're also 21st in the nation on defense. So, I mean, you got a team that's damn near top 20 in offense and defensive efficiency. That's going to be real hard for NC State to get past that. But
team that almost lost to Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. And arguably they probably should have lost if except for that, like they ended up going on that run, and that's part of what Marquette can do, is they can just blitz you on offense and then have a barrage of threes go in, and then all of a sudden next thing you know you're down 10. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting game for sure. I'm not really seeing too many weaknesses on the defensive end where NC State can make it out like bandits, except for maybe down in the, like, with DJ Burns just posting up and bodying people. But they're like, NC State's not really a 3-point shooting team. Granted, that's one of the weaker points for Marquette, but NC State doesn't really capitalize on those opportunities. And in terms of on offense, I think that Marquette can get their shot off pretty well. But again, I just have to. I gotta stick with the hot hand, like you said. I'm jumping on the wagon. I think that this is too many points to give a Marquette team. Like we said before, they arguably should have lost to Colorado, and I think that NC State has shown that they can hang with these teams. And as if like there's some like, okay, well, they can beat them, right? There you go. Okay. Relax. But I'm not saying that they're going to win outright. I'm not crazy like you, but I will say that they will at least cover. That's what I'm at least predicting on this one.
Fair enough. So,
yeah, no, go ahead. You can...
As we mentioned, we still have all these number one seeds still in. So out of all four of these upcoming matchups, who do you feel has the best chance to upset and number 1 seed. Obviously, we got UConn versus San Diego State, North Carolina versus Alabama, Houston versus Duke, who we both talked about. I think that probably would be the closest one in my eyes, and Purdue versus Gonzaga.
I mean,
also Purdue looks good. Usually Purdue always gets knocked down, stuff like that. They look
true.
good. Zach Edey out here dominating with 30 and 20 like he's Will Chamberlain. So
I think that I talked to you about this before we got on here. I do think that Gonzaga is going to be one of those teams that's going to be able to knock off, or at least have the best opportunity to knock off one of the 1 seeds. I mean, Purdue had a pretty nice cakewalk to where they're at right now to be able to play against Gonzaga, and Gonzaga is riding underneath the eyes of most people right now. Usually, we have Gonzaga in the favorite role. They're like 30 and 20 or whatever, or 30 and 2, and they are favorites in just about every game typically. Now we're seeing them in this underdog role, and Mark Few, granted, did they lose to them earlier on in the season twice? Yeah, sure, but that's beside the point. The point is now. The point is now.
Don't look at that.
You give more. Like this is a different Gonzaga team than they were back during. I think it was like the Maui Invitational when they initially played, and then I forgot what the second time was. But this is a different Gonzaga team. Now they're playing more as a collaborative team. Their offensive efficiency is 7th in the nation. Their defensive efficiency is 41st, which isn't ideal, but it's much improved from, I believe it was at like 60 or 70s before the tournament started. So they're able to dominate not only on the offensive end but also on the defensive end. And I think that Mark Few's gonna have an answer for Zach Edey down low, because I mean, sure, the guy's 7, like I don't know, 8 feet tall.
7'4".
So I was gonna say, yeah, so he's 8 feet tall essentially. You round up. When anything over 7 feet is 8 feet.
Fair.
That's just how the math works. Don't ask me. But moral of the story is, I think that they're going to have an answer for him down low, and Purdue is not going to be able to be playing against a 16 seed or like a
Utah State.
Utah State of the world, to where Utah State wasn't even supposed to win that first game. Honestly. Like I told you, I told you about the stat where they were like 1-19 all time.
They won by 16.
I mean, but I'm just saying, man. They are not a team that should be in the tournament. Period.
They looked. I'm not gonna lie. They looked better in the first 8. I mean, it's 8 minutes, but in the first 8 minutes against Purdue, I think it was like 22-22 before Purdue went on the ginormous run to close out the half, and they actually looked okay. And they're kind of like approach and how they were going to match up against Zach Edey and blitzing him wasn't terribly bad, at least to start, but then they were able to kind of adjust and adapt. So
I mean, they're playing against like 6-footers, like exactly playing against 6-footers. So like what are you gonna do when you're playing against them like that? You know what I mean?
It's Gonzaga's big as like only like 6'7", 6'8".
I mean, that's bigger than 6 foot. And
I mean,
also,
true, but
I also do trust Mark Few. I think it's just it's a coaching mismatch as well too in this game. Mark Few through and through is going to outcoach Purdue's coach 9 times out of 10. Sure, maybe Purdue wins just on talent alone, and maybe they're able to put up a few more threes than Gonzaga is. But I do think that ultimately, when it comes down to it, Mark Few is going to have the answer for Zach Edey, and they're going to force the others to beat them. Granted, easier said than done, because Purdue is also the number 1 team when it comes to 3-point percentage. However, Gonzaga is 7th in the nation when it comes to 2-point percentage, whereas Purdue is only 60th at defending the mid-range to around the basket area. So I think that is an area that Gonzaga can have some success. Now, again, easier said than done because that mug is big, you know what I'm saying? So pulling up for committee, but also getting him in the pick and roll, getting him into foul trouble is going to be the best way to attack this guy, because it looks like he's moving in mud anytime he's in the pick and roll. So I think that Nemhard putting him in the pick and roll is going to be probably their best bet to win this game. And having those knockdown shooters in the corners on the kickouts, that's going to be the best way to get it done.
Yeah, that's what the commentators, a lot of people are talking about when, the small glimmer of hope that Utah State had to possibly beat Purdue is they're going to have to hit those mid-range shots. They had Zach Edey out in the perimeter a lot. I don't know why. If I was Purdue, I would just try to switch everything, keep him in the paint as much as he could. But they try to have him on the perimeter. But when they did do that, then they're taken advantage of, and then Utah State was able to score. So if they do that against Gonzaga, which I don't think that they will, because I don't think it'll bode well, then Gonzaga could have a chance. But they're going to have to hit those middies. And I think that's kind of like the test to beat Purdue. You kind of have to hit your mid-range shots because you're not going to be able to go in the paint. And if the three's not falling, then they're just going to, they're going to gobble up every rebound because Zach Edey is literally averaging like 19 rebounds a game so far in this tournament. So it is going to be a tough matchup for Gonzaga. But, they had two convincing wins. Kansas, who, kind of was on and off throughout this season, ended up being a 4 seed. Still, I think was a pretty good team. They beat them very convincingly by 21 points. So now they go against Purdue, and we'll have to wait and see with that. Another one you did talk about was Houston and Duke. Oh, you said what?
Also real quick. 10 times out of 10, I'm going to fade a team that just dropped 100 in a college basketball game. So, like, that's just an outright, that's just an outright area where, okay, they had this giant barrage of an offensive performance.
Blitz and a half.
I'm gonna fade the hell out of them the next game that they play, regardless of who they're playing, what the spread is, or anything like that. I'm automatically just going to be on the other side. Not to mention they also shot 47.8% from 3-point range. That's not going to be repeated again, especially not against Gonzaga and Mark Few's team. So
I think people know that too. They're only a 5.5 point favorite. I mean, against Gonzaga. So for being, the number 1 seed against the number 4 seed, I mean, I don't think that that's too big of a spread.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I believe they were like 4.5 or so, or 3 or 4 in that game in the Maui Invitational before. So, and I mean, that was also technically on a neutral. But
yeah, they lost by Purdue won by 10 in that game. So we'll see how the rematch goes. I don't really have any worries, knock on wood, against UConn in San Diego State. I think North Carolina, Alabama, and Houston Duke are going to be 2 very interesting games. So do you have any potential upsets in those games for Alabama or Duke, or are you still going to go with the number 1s?
I'm still gonna go with the number 1. Oh, side note real quick. Also, it was they were Purdue was 5-point favorites in that same game, the Maui Invitational, when they lost by 10 there. But yeah, I mean, I think this might be one of those seasons where a lot of the chalk gets there. It's I hate doing
say that, and there's so many upsets, but like you said, everything basically got brought to reality in the second round. They're like, okay, you had your fun, Cinderella story, over. Unless you're NC State,
Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those scenarios where, like we said, in the beginning of the tournament, a lot of the dogs won, and then after that, it was just like all chalk. And so people are going to be looking at that trend and be like, oh, well, now they're due. Like the dogs are going to start barking here in the Sweet 16 and going on forward, which is not necessarily the case. Like, it's not necessarily how you want to make bets, is that, oh, well, they, like, all the favorites won, so now it has to come back to the mean, so we must take some dogs here. No. But that being said, I do like UConn in this situation. I had talked to you about this before. I wrote this down on a little sticky note. I heard this on a podcast, Follow the Money. Shout out to them. San Diego State has made the Sweet 16 4 times in their history. Only 1 time have they had a team where they were a single-digit seed that they had played. So in that team that Kawhi? They played, that was Kawhi Leonard's team in 2011 when they played against Temple. All of the other teams that they played have been double-digit seeds. Like, how they've been very lucky each time that they've made it to the Sweet 16 in their history. In 2011, they played, like we said before, they played against Temple, who was a number 9 seed, and then they played against Northern Colorado, who was a 15 seed. And then 2014, they played against New Mexico State, which was a 13 seed, and then North Dakota State, which is 12. 2023, they played against Charleston, who was a 12 seed, and then Furman, who's a 13. This year, played against UAB, who's a 12, and then Yale, who's a 13. So,
Yeah.
I mean, props to them last year for also beating Alabama, I believe it was, to end up making it to the national championship. But at the same time, they have been extremely lucky in these matchups, and I think that they're going to run into a major problem, which is UConn and Dan Hurley, who is honestly kind of a scary guy, and he thinks that it's the world against him, which maybe it is, because he also is on his conspiracy theory BS where he thinks that the committee set him up for failure, essentially. And I mean, to be fair, that bracket is pretty brutal. But I mean, you have you have Auburn going out in the first round right there, and then you pretty much don't have to worry about BYU, who was the 6th seed. And I mean, now, yeah, sure, you have to play against the team that made it to the championship last year, but at the same time, they're not the same San Diego State team that they were last year. They lost their big, and they're, I don't want to call them fugazi, but they have a lot of Houston in them, to where they're not going to be able to keep up with the scoring that UConn has, and UConn really doesn't have any weaknesses anywhere at all.
Exactly.
And so 11 points, I honestly might not be enough. I'm going to lay the 11 and be happy about it too. So I think that,
Still think 11 is kind of rude in a March Madness game. I understand it's UConn. UConn is the team that I have to win the national championship, but the way that the runs have been working and going, and I don't know. I'm not going to take it. I don't have to, but good luck with that. Good luck with that. Alabama and Duke are both 4.5 point favorites against UNC, or 4.5 point underdogs against UNC and Houston. I have the talk in both those games as well. So anything else that you wanted to get to in the men's before we venture off into the women's side of the brackets?
No, that's the main thing. I guess just a quick recap of at least who I got is Illinois money line, and then we got UNC minus 11. Or sorry, UConn minus 11, UNC minus 4. I'm just going to go with money line with that one. UNC scares me sometimes. I like Clemson to at least cover in this matchup here. What's the chef's name again? Shefflin.
Yeah,
I think that's hilarious. So
7.5 point spread.
Yeah, I feel like that's a bit much. A little steep for me. So I think that's 7.5. I mean, honestly, Clemson's been shooting lights out this game too, or this tournament too, and they're flying under the radar. And Arizona's one of those teams too that I don't trust as far as I can throw them. And
they convincingly beat Baylor too. Honestly, I was surprised by that. Yeah, they kind of controlled the majority of that game.
Exactly, and I mean that was one of the things with Baylor that we knew, is that their defense is not the defense that they used to have before, where they can lock teams down. They might not. They can also keep up with the scoring as well. But this year it was just only scoring, and they were just bricking free throws left and right, and it was honestly kind of ridiculous. So I think that 7.5 is a bit much for this team. So for Arizona to be laying in this spot, and then I like the Zags plus 5.5. Tennessee money line. They were just putting up bricks left and right. I don't think that that's going to happen again in the matchup against Creighton. And Creighton is also coming off of a double OT game where arguably they probably should have lost, but Oregon just ran out of gas essentially. And I feel bad for I also had a bet on Oregon. That was the only game I lost that night. But they ended up losing, not being able to cover any number. And they just, like I said before, they just ran out of gas. And then NC State joining the wagon. And then Houston money line to finish off is what I'm going to go with there. So,
yeah, I pretty much have the same thing, except I'm just not touching that UConn game. I agree with you with the Texas-Tennessee. They were able to squeak out the victory 62-58, but they only shot 36% from the field, and they couldn't get any shot to fall. So I don't feel like they're going to have the same problem against Creighton, who, even though we basically have like a few days between the different rounds in this situation, are still coming off that double overtime loss. So I would still take Tennessee overall in that game as well. So moving on to the women's, talk about chalk. This has been pretty chalky as well. I think other than Duke and Baylor, everything has been chalk. Were there any surprises so far in these first two rounds for you? And do you have any changes going forward based off of those first two rounds?
Yeah, I got a few notes here. I always got notes everywhere. But yeah, so like you had said before, it's pretty chalky on the women's side. So far in the tournament, it was 36-4 straight up, and 19-21. That was before last night's games, and then updating it to now, it's now 44-4 straight up and 23-25 ATS. So interesting enough that even though the favorites are winning these games outright, and sometimes it's not even close, I see you out there, South Carolina. But at the same time, the bookmakers are doing a pretty good job of balancing out the action, and the dogs are actually slightly ahead here, with going 25-23 if you flip it there. So, like you said, I think that the biggest thing is that those four teams that did have those upsets were Middle Tennessee, that beat Louisville, which surprised me. Was honestly one of the bigger surprises of the tournament here. They ended up winning 71-69. Jalen Gregory she just balled out in that game. Had 24 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, was 5 of 8 from the field. She was 4 of 7 from 3 and 10 of 11 from the free throw line. Talk about make your free throws when it matters most. They only won by 2. And so, I mean, it's one of those things. Take note of that. Texas A&M. The reason why you lost is because you shot 64% from the field, or from the free throw line there, as opposed to, even though you shot 45 free throws, which is ridiculous.
That's a lot.
Anyways, yes, that's how you gonna shoot 45 free throws and lose a game. That's beside the point. Anyways, sticking with Middle Tennessee here, they also had Savannah Wheeler, who had 22 points, 2 assists, 2 rebounds, was 6 of 14 from the field, and was 3 of 5 from 3-point range, and went 7 of 8 from the free throw line. Make your free throws, boys and girls out there. Also, 20 of Savannah's 22 points were in the second half of the game, and they were at one point down by 18 points to this Louisville team, and they ended up marching and charging.
Turn me up.
Exactly, and getting that W there. The other surprise upset was, like you had mentioned before, was Duke over Ohio State. I mean, that
was surprising to me.
That was very surprising, honestly. I thought Cody McMahon would be able to do enough, but I mean, I was clearly wrong. Reagan Richardson was able to drop 28 points with 7 boards, and she was 11 of 18 from the field, shooting 3 of 3 from downtown. She shot 51% overall, they shot 51% overall as a team. And I mean, I think one of the main reasons why Ohio State lost this game, they were 1 of 11 from 3-point range, and they got out-rebounded 38-20 in this game. So, I mean, anytime you have that going on, it's not going to, that's just a bad combination. If you're not going to be making your shots and you're also going to get out-rebounded by 18, that's a recipe for disaster there. And I mean, the other game that they had the other night was Stanford that narrowly got upset last night, that you were talking about, that Creighton should have won. I mean, I don't know if they should have won, but at the same time, I do think that the addition of Lauren Betts on UCLA's team is going to be massive. It was kind of funny watching in the first half there. As soon as she checked in, they were just going to her, right, and she'd back them down, spin move, drop step, layup. Okay, go to the other shoulder, drop step, layup, and she was just getting buckets. But then Then Creighton was like, no, we ain't playing that. Not only did they double team, they triple team, they triple team her. They're like, you anybody else, anybody else. And at the
Shit.
time, at the time, it was working because they couldn't throw a skittle into the ocean, UCLA that is, and it was a bad combination for them because Creighton was hitting everything. They were swapping threes left and right, and eventually, obviously, as most things do, progressed to the knee. And even though Creighton was up, I believe at one point they're up by 10, UCLA never scared, never wavered, ended up coming back, ended up winning that game. And I think that ultimately, you got to give Emily Ryan, or sorry, I'm thinking of a different game here. But you got to give the Cyclones their flowers for playing a hell of a game and keeping it close and respectable. The game I was about to mention was the near upset of Stanford again in the round previous of that, which was against Iowa State, where your girl ended up not having ended up not having as big of an impact as some might have thought. How
she had a big impact. It was just negative. It was bad.
I mean,
you go from dropping 40 points and shooting 90% from the field to going 3 of 21. It's never that, and then fouling out. It's not a recipe for success. And then Stanford on the other end with the Kiki, do you love me, dropping 41 herself. So,
yeah, and that was the biggest takeaway from this game. Not only do we got to give our flowers to Emily Ryan on Iowa State, who had 36 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists on 12 of 21 shooting, and dropped 6 threes too. Absolute hooper, ending her career as a Cyclone right there. Shout out to her. But also notable is Cam Brink. They at times were trying to, like, we know who Cam Brink is, right? Like, you can run the offense through her, but not every time because everyone and their mom knows the ball's going to go to her. It was just kind of like the Lauren Betts effect, is that like we know who the ball is going to go to, like Zach Edey, we know it's going to go there. It's just a matter of whether or not you're going to stop it or how you're going to defend it when the ball gets there. And ultimately they did a pretty good job, and they might have actually shown part of the game plan or part of the blueprint to how you're supposed to defeat Stanford. And now I think that ultimately, even though Cam Brink was held to only 8 points and 8 rebounds and ended up fouling out ultimately, I think that Kiki, like you said, do you love me? She ended up dropping 41 and had a modest 16 boards as well, and throwing 4 assists, and why not have 3 blocks and a steal as well.
I am Anthony Davis.
Legit. Oh, also, make your free throws, boys and girls. 9 of 9 from the free throw line. So I think that you can stop one, but you can't stop them all. And I was gonna make a Pokemon reference there for a second. But I was like,
catch them all. Definitely think that Stanford showed their versatility individually and as a team. So when Brink wasn't able to get things going, she still was, a good force defensively. She was on Crooks most of the time, ended up having 5 blocks, even though she ended up fouling out against her. So we have that, and then like you said, we had Kiki and Hannah still able to drop points for Stanford, who I think that they look good for going to well. Who are they playing against in this round?
You're talking about Stanford?
Stanford. NC State. Uh-oh.
They're going against.
It might be in the water.
Your alma mater.
Something might be in the water. Hey, no, Wazoo is my alma mater. They played tough this week, and they got the second round. Hey, man. That's all we can ask. Don't worry about that.
Yep. And the one of the other games too, that was kind of fun to watch, was Tennessee taking on NC State, your NC State team, and Rakia Jackson, absolute dog out there, dropping 33 points, but it wasn't enough to overcome your NC State Wolfpack team, where they ended up. Okay. They had a more solid team approach to the game. with Brooks, Rivers, and Baldwin out there, all in double digits. And I think it was Sanaya Rivers that I sent to you. I was like,
You
dude,
got the whole team.
she out here hooping, like she out here making kids look just dumb, like make them look like little girls and stuff. It was crazy. She is an absolute hooper, baller, supreme, absolute bucket. But ultimately, I think that the right team won. Tennessee didn't really have any other offense outside of Rakia Jackson, and your NC State team was just a little bit too much in that role there. The one of the other upsets that happened was Baylor over Vatek, and I mean I don't really call it that much of an upset because for one they were only one. Yeah, I mean, but also they were 1 point underdogs, so like they and everybody, yeah, and the writing was on the wall. Everybody knew what was going to happen in this game. Surprised that it was this close, honestly. But we talked about it last time with Vatek's best player, 3-time or third in the league. I keep on saying the league, third in the nation in scoring. Yeah, literally. Elizabeth Kentley, she was out hurt, and without them, scoring is kind of at a premium for them. And they had her childhood best friend out there who was also being able to get buckets, but ultimately it wasn't enough. They ended up ending their season in a loss to Baylor, 75-72. Any comments on anything in here so far, sir?
No, other than that, that was pretty much it. Obviously, we had the juggernauts in South Carolina doing what they do. USC looks good with Juju, and LSU still looking good. I'm still surprised that you have UCLA beaten both LSU and Iowa. If Iowa obviously were to take care of business against Colorado for the Elite Eight, but I mean that still kind of gets me. You just want them to be the villain in this in this situation. You're talking about like, oh, this viewership and we want these ratings and all that kind of stuff. She was like, you know what? Nah, they're gonna take care of Angel Reese, and then they're gonna come up there and take care of Caitlin Clark before she even gets to the Final Four.
Well,
in her last season with Iowa.
I mean, it's just like I was telling you before, right? It's that outside of Caitlin Clark, who is there? Who's going to step up? Sure, they got Gabby Marshall, and I forgot the other gal's name. But they have they have a couple of folks outside of Caitlin Clark. But at the same time, you see what happens. Like, granted, I do think that there is a little bit of scripting going on with this West Virginia game, but I do think that we saw what happens when you have a team that I wouldn't say that they shut down Caitlin Clark, but they sure made life a lot more difficult.
A little inefficient.
And so I think that ultimately, while again they didn't shut her down, they made life more difficult. But I think that they were able to show that make somebody else beat you, and you're at least going to have a chance to win. And now West Virginia didn't necessarily have the best players to do that, but they showed that you put together a solid defensive game plan. And I mean, not that the world is yours, but you're at least going to be in the game and have a chance to win, versus some of these other teams out there, they're just getting boat raced. And that's my main thing for having them getting bounced. As for LSU, yeah, they're all right. They're cool,
haven't been sold yet.
Well,
I mean, you had their struggles throughout the season and stuff like that, but I mean, these have been some. Obviously the Rice game was 10 points or whatever, but after that it was a very convincing win against MTSU. But I mean, they were also an 11 seed, so
yeah, and also I think that the Bruins are just a more well-rounded team, and I just cannot get the image out of my head that it literally took 3 people to body up Lauren Betts. Like, there's a reason why she was one of the most highly recruited players in the country when she first went to Stanford, and then she transferred to crosstown rival in UCLA.
UCLA.
So yeah, and so I think that the addition of Lauren Betts in this tournament is going to be absolutely pivotal for them going forward. And we saw that as soon as she's on the court, all the attention that was drawn onto her, and after that, they just got to make their shots because they're going to be open regardless. Like you can't guard everybody, and that's just going to be the nature of the beast. Is that there's going to be more offensive, options on offense for LSU or for UCLA than there is for LSU, and I think that defensively, LSU has all these Freudian slips, man. I think that defensively, UCLA is going to have more answers for what LSU has to throw at them. Granted, Mulkey, great coach and everything. There was something going on with like, do you work for like the press or something? I don't remember what that was, but
she said that they were supposed to release a news report, or some people had been gathering like news for her over the past 2 years, and that it was going to defame her, and that she was going to sue if they, she's like, try me type. So I don't know what they got, but they got something.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, with Mulkey, there's always something going on underneath the rug, so to speak, or got a few skeletons in her closet. But ultimately, I can't deny greatness, but it is kind of sus that they have all this information on her out there. That's all I'm saying. And I think with all those distractions, that's going to bode well for a UCLA team, which is, for the most part, has their head on straight and doesn't have a bunch of people out in the media saying this, that, and the other, have all this drama going on. I think that, like I said, granted, they got all these All-Americans over there, Van Lith, Morrow, and Angel Reese. They're all great. They're great
champions.
That's cool. That's cute. But like I said before,
but yeah,
exactly. And so she ain't got that experience. But
okay,
like I said before, the dynamic duo between Kiki Rice and Lauren Betts is going to be too much for LSU to stop. And like I said before, again, they have an answer for Angel Reese and they have an answer for Van Lith. So I think that their defensive prowess is going to be too much for LSU to overcome. So.
And Iowa, apparently. But the way you talk about it makes them sound like MJ Pippen duo. So, okay, why don't you just have them going all the way? Beating Carolina, go ahead. Just say it.
Well,
fine.
See, that's the problem. Again,
okay.
It's the problem is it's the the South Carolina.
As soon as we bring up South Carolina, you'd start stuttering.
Make me nervous. You can't bring up that team. It's like talking about Voldemort. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me a little nervous bringing up that team because it's the South Carolina Invitational, pretty much. They haven't lost in basically 2 seasons, essentially, except for their loss last season. So they're mad, they're angry, and they're looking for revenge. And I think that ultimately they're going to get it. But do I think that maybe USC? Do I think that maybe Oregon State or Notre Dame can compete with them on their way to the Final Four? Probably not. But like I said,
it's possible.
The Pac-12 is a much better conference than what you got going over there in the SEC, because you have all these teams that are in the tournament right now, and you see, 1, how high of seeds they are, 2, how well they're doing in the tournament, and 3, that the success of the Pac-12.
Round 2.
Well, okay, I'm saying, just saying, they made it further than the
True.
SEC.
Fair. We still here. Goddamn.
Okay, barely. And so I just think that overall the Pac-12 has been a better conference. And I mean, you see that with USC and Juju over there. You see that with Lauren Betts and UCLA. You see that with Oregon State as well. Shout out to them. And Stanford too. And so I just think that overall UCLA is battle tested. They've been there. They've done that. Maybe not
LSU
the championship. I'm just saying they're not the championship. But in terms of playing against these high caliber teams on a night in, night out basis, because they're in the same conference as these elite teams.
Fair.
And so I just think that, UCLA, they got the height, they got the strength, they got the shots, and they're going to be open too, because I just cannot get that that visual out of my head where where they literally not one, not two, but they had to have 3 people try and defend Lauren Betts for them to actually
Shaq
slow her
treatment.
down. Literally. And so it's like, no, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, would you have them beating USC in the Final Four? And you have them beating Juju as well?
I do. While I, while I am a fan of my Trojans, I do think that they ultimately are the better overall team. And sure, USC has Juju, but Juju's been struggling as of late here, right? And also, I don't think that they have the defensive prowess to contain UCLA the way that Creighton was able to do last game, and then also Iowa State was able to do the game before. Or I'm thinking of Stanford in that game, but the way that Creighton was able to the game before, where they're able to slow them down there. So I don't think that USC necessarily has that kind of influence on them, but I do think scoring wise, if it turns into a shootout, USC is going to win. But if it turns into slow the game down, playing the half court,
if somebody's going to take advantage and control the game, you think it's going to be UCLA?
Yeah, I do think so. And
it's too much talking about UCLA for you not to just say that they're gonna go all the way. So I'm saying, like, if you're gonna be, that's gonna be the 3. So you have the 4 best. That's literally, I would say, the 3 best teams in the tournament, other than South Carolina. You're just gonna have them run through all of them in their quest to get to the championship and be like, you know what? All this great talk, all this dynamic duo, and MJ and Pippen and the Shaq talk and stuff like that. Well, nice second place trophy waiting for you guys at the top.
Well, again, it's the South Carolina Invitational. So
if they beat these teams, if they beat US, or if they have to beat LSU, then they beat Iowa, then they beat USC, you're still not going to choose them over South Carolina at that point.
I can't.
Okay.
Bro, are you gonna bet against?
No, but I don't have this borderline Cinderella.
Borderline Cinderella. They're number 2 seed.
I don't think that they were in the top 5 for favorites to win the championship. So,
and that's a travesty.
Okay.
It's not about anything else other than the fact that, like, 1 through 5, South Carolina is dominant at every position. And I forgot the freshman gal's name, but she was basically talking about imagine being somebody that can score on anybody, and then also being the same person that nobody can score on. And I was like, well, shit. I ain't trying to go by her.
I'm her.
Literally. So, yeah, I just it's going to be a lot for them to try and it's going to be a lot for UCLA to try and get by them. But ultimately, I do think that, like I said before, the combination of Kiki Rice and Lauren Betts is going to get the job done. And, it's going to be a close one in some of these matchups. I ain't gonna lie. I
genuinely think LSU is going to win that game. I think we even give too much respect to USC. I genuinely think that LSU is going to beat them. And
you're crazy.
So how close is that? Oh, they're favored. It went.
You're crazy.
They're 4-point favorites. Everybody's crazy.
What do you mean?
LSU's favored it.
Yeah, that's cute.
Okay. So
I'm just saying, man.
All right.
I'm just saying it's because of the notoriety and the popularity. It's the same treatment that the Lakers get. If it's basically a pick'em, the Lakers are going to be favored, regardless of whether or not they're doing. Dude, I'm just saying. That's exactly my point. Is that people always have this perception of them being this juggernaut team. Sure, they won it last year, but if they're this juggernaut team, then why are they? What are they, the 6th seed or something like that?
LSU is a 3 seed.
3 seed, might as well be the 6 seed. I'm thinking of Tennessee. But
I mean, and the only reason that
why aren't they the
UCLA
1 seed?
is the 2 seed is because they're number 1 in the Pac-12 and stuff like that. LSU has a better record.
Last time I checked, USC won the conference tournament though.
Oh, well, that's true. I don't know why UCLA is a 2 seed. That's ridiculous.
Exactly, because they're better. That's why. That's what I'm saying, bro. They're a better team.
Like, and they're underdogs.
That's fine, man. Okay, what about your NC State? Are they the better team? NC State
Yeah,
on the
but
men's side?
Yeah, but they're them.
Okay.
UCLA is UCLA. NC State is them. Like, I told you that from jump. And they beaten like okay. So if UCLA would have played like, you know, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I ain't gonna give them no credit. I gotta see it against LSU, and I gotta see it against Iowa, then I gotta see it against USC, and then all that talk for them to be like, yeah, y'all about to get Molly to the championship. I don't hear it.
I hear all that you're saying, but moral of the story is, Mr. Harris, the Pac-12 is going to win unanimously in this round coming up here. We're gonna see Oregon State win. We're gonna see USC win. We're gonna see UCLA win. And I mean, they're not technically part of the Pac-12, but they're on the West Coast. We're going to see Gonzaga win as well. God damn it! All right, we're going to see all of these teams. Don't forget about Stanford. My bad. I forgot about Stanford out there. We're going to see all these teams on the West Coast prove that they are the best coast, and that is the moral of that story. So.
Yeah, the national champion didn't come out of came out of SEC, but Pac-12 had a hell of a Sweet 16. It was great. It was way to go, guys! Go drop the banner.
Yep.
So, but fair enough. Anything else that you wanted to get into within March Madness before we get out of here?
One last thing is just going to be that we got to give our flowers to Mackenzie Forbes. Shout out to her, giving us a like on our post there. Back-to-back 20-plus point games for her. Something per as usual. When it comes to being a walking bucket, had 20 points against Kansas last game. And the game before that had 23 points. So just another day at the park for her.
Like that.
Exactly. And so, had 6 threes. Just because. Just why not? And I think that, going forward, USC is going to need her to continue to put up these kind of performances. If they're going to want to make it deep, as well as the other nerds out there as well. So, shout out to them.
Definitely. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. This has been the Call Your Shot podcast with your host, Alix Harrison Drew Moore. If you like this podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube and you like this episode, make sure to give it a like. Make sure to follow us on Instagram to basically get the links to all of our social medias and to our YouTube page. And we're going to go from there. So we'll see y'all next week, and it will be Final Four.
Alrighty. Peace.